comedian David Boyle, and I'm quitting alcohol. So I was going to do a different fucking episode today, but I think this is important, especially for Americans. It's going to be a hard listen for Americans, but it's better to be aware of what's going on than it is to bury your head in the sand. That's my opinion anyway. So this was written by the only geopolitical analyst I even bother with now. He is the only guy that has picked pretty much every single major event in the last 12 months since I've been following. He's absolutely fucking unbelievable. His name is @EvanWrites on X. I've talked about him before, and he just started a Patreon, which I'm a member of, and he's going to cap it at 2,000. It's up to like 500, and I highly fucking recommend you join this Patreon. He's made like 15 or 16. He's made more posts on his Patreon than I have on mine, and he's had it for like 4 days. He's actually inspired me to improve my Patreon, but I won't worry about that. I'll get to this. His Patreon is Cold State Capital, if you are interested in it after you listen to this. So this is for Americans. It's on Twitter if you want to read it yourself. Evan writes on X. EVAN writes on X. So here it is. For decades, the American political system has sustained itself on a single operating fiction, that elections matter. The left believed that electing the right Democrats would produce social progress, expand protections, and hold corporate power accountable. The right believed that electing the right Republicans would restore traditional values, secure borders, and rebuild American economic strength. The MAGA movement believed with particular intensity that Donald Trump represented a genuine rupture from the establishment, a wrecking ball sent to destroy the machinery of elite capture and return power to ordinary Americans. All three groups are starting to converge on the same conclusion, arriving from different directions but landing in the same place. The left watched Biden continue Trump's immigration enforcement architecture, expand military spending, and deliver nothing resembling the transformative social investment his campaign promised. They watched the Democratic establishment crush its own progressive wing with more energy than it ever directed at a Republican obstruction. They are beginning to understand that the party exists to absorb and neutralize progressive energy, not to act on it. The right watched 2 decades of Republican governance produce no meaningful reduction in the size of government, no reversal of cultural trends they oppose, and no restoration of the economic conditions they remember. Every Republican president expanded the deficit. Every Republican Congress funded the wars. Every conservative Supreme Court majority failed to produce the cultural restoration that was promised. The institutions captured the revolutionaries, not the other way around. And the MAGA base is now watching Trump, their chosen instrument of disruption, fill his administration with the same Goldman Sachs alumni and same defense contractor lobbyists, the same private equity figures who populated every administration before him. They watched Jared Kushner collect $2 billion from Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund while generating zero return on investment because the investment was never commercial. It was blackmail. They are watching tariffs that were sold as protection for American workers function instead as leverage for renegotiating the terms under which global capital accesses American markets. Terms that benefit the negotiators and their financial networks, not the factory workers in Ohio who were promised their jobs back. The convergence is not ideological. These three groups do not agree on policy, on values, or on what America should be. What they are converging on is a structural recognition. The electoral system is a selection mechanism for which faction of private sector power gets to operate the state apparatus for the next 4 years. The policies that affect their lives, the ones that determine whether wages rise or fall, whether housing is affordable or financialized into an asset class, whether healthcare is accessible or remains a debt generation mechanism, those policies do not change with administrations because they are not set by administrations. They are set by capital interests that captured the state. And those interests are continuous across every presidency, every Congress, and every judicial appointment of the last 40 years. This is not cynicism. It is a structural observation that can be verified by anyone willing to look at outcomes rather than rhetoric. Track what actually happens to wages, to household debt, to incarceration rates, to healthcare costs, to infrastructure quality, to wealth concentration across administrations of both parties. The trajectory is identical. It does not matter who sits in the Oval Office. The operating system runs the same code regardless of which user interface is installed on top of it. That is what state capture means. The state has been captured by business, and business has been captured by the financiers. And the financiers are captured by zero-sum game theory. No national loyalty, no ideological commitment, no obligation to the population of any country. They optimize for return. When America provided the best return, they invested in America. That calculation has changed with a categorical decision. The financial industrial complex has made the decision that most Americans have not yet absorbed. A decision that was not announced, was not debated, and will never be acknowledged publicly, but which is visible in every data point that matters. They have concluded that the United States, as a platform for capital growth, has passed its peak utility. This is not speculation, it is observable in the movement of capital itself. Between 2021 and 2024, venture capital investment in India crossed $30 billion. Microsoft committed over $2 billion to data center expansion in Japan and pledged more than $1 billion to build AI infrastructure in Kenya and East Africa. Google established its first cloud computing region in Africa in 2022. Amazon Web Services began building data centers across Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa. BlackRock's leadership has stated publicly that the firm is transitioning its investment thesis towards emerging markets and the global south. These are not experiments, these are exits. The logic is not complicated. The United States has a fertility rate of 1.62, below replacement level of 2.1 and falling. Its infrastructure earned a C- rating from the American Society of Civil Engineers. Its education system ranks 38th globally in mathematics. It lost 5 million manufacturing jobs between 2000 and 2015, and those jobs are not coming back because they were sent away deliberately, not lost accidentally. Its political system cannot pass basic legislation. Its social cohesion has fractured along every available fault line: racial, generational, geographic, economic, cultural. Its consumer base is sustained not by income but by credit, which means not by wealth but by debt, which means the consumption that drives the economy is itself a form of extraction from the population. Compare that to what the Global South offers. Nigeria's population will double by 2050. India's median age is 28. Sub-Saharan African populations will exceed China and Europe combined within 30 years. Indonesia, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Egypt, and Ethiopia represent billions of consumers who have not yet been fully integrated into the global financial system. The labor is cheaper, the markets are growing, the regulatory environments are more accommodating, and the demographic trajectory guarantees decades of expansion. For capital that optimizes on a 50-year horizon, the calculation is obvious. The future is not in a country whose population is aging, indebted, divided, and shrinking. The future is where the people are. The categorical decision is not to destroy the United States. Destruction is unnecessary and counterproductive. The decision is to phase it out as the central hub of capital accumulation and to reposition towards new centers of gravity. The state apparatus will continue to be useful. Its military still projects power, its financial system still clears the majority of global transactions, its technology sector still produces valuable intellectual property, but the investment thesis has shifted. What was once the engine is becoming the legacy asset. What was once the growth market is becoming the managed decline. To understand what this means for ordinary Americans, you have to understand how the wealth distribution system actually works. Not the way economic textbooks describe it, but the way it functions in practice. The financialized capital that sits at the top of the American economic hierarchy does not distribute wealth downward through wages and investment in domestic productivity. It distributes wealth downward through the complexes, the military-industrial complex, the technology-industrial complex, the consumer-industrial complex, and the financial-industrial complex itself. These complexes are the transmission mechanisms through which capital spending reaches the broader population. Defense contractors employ engineers and factory workers, technology companies employ programmers and support staff, consumer platforms employ warehouse workers and drivers, financial institutions employ analysts and administrators. The wealth does not trickle down through generosity. It trickles down through the operational needs of the complexes that serve the capital class. That's how wealth distribution actually works in America. When those complexes redirect their operations outwards, the trickle dries up. The technology industrial complex is already well into this transition. The next generation of data centers, AI research facilities, and cloud infrastructure is being built in India, Kenya, Japan, and Southeast Asia. The jobs that would have gone to American workers, the construction contracts, the maintenance positions, the technical roles are going to workers in countries where the growth is happening. Silicon Valley will retain its headquarters functions and its highest value roles, but the mass employment that technology expansion generates will increasingly occur elsewhere. The military-industrial complex is pivoting in two directions simultaneously. Internationally, it is converting NATO from a US-subsidized security alliance into a customer base. Trump's pressure on European members to increase defense spending to 3 or 4% of GDP is not about burden sharing. It's about market creation. European nations will buy American weapon systems through American-approved procurement channels, generating revenue for Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman, without the American taxpayer bearing the cost. The military-industrial complex gets its returns from European budgets instead of American ones. The consumer-industrial complex is following the consumers. When the next billion customers are in Lagos and Jakarta and New Delhi, the investment in retail infrastructure, logistics networks, marketing systems, and consumer credit platforms follows them there. American consumers, already stretched to their limit on credit, are a declining market. Their spending power is artificial, sustained by debt rather than income. The debt-sustained consumption is inherently self-limiting because each dollar of spending generates a future dollar of repayment that reduces future spending capacity. The consumer complex will continue to extract from American consumers through subscription models, planned obsolescence, and financialized purchasing. Buy now, pay later for groceries is a clearer signal of where the trajectory ends. But the growth investment, the new stores, the new platforms, the new logistics networks will be built where the demographic growth is. The financial industrial complex, the apex of the entire structure, is already globally positioned by design. It has never been nationally loyal. Its assets are distributed across jurisdictions, its instruments are denominated in multiple currencies, and its optimization is borderless. The shift is not that the financial complex is leaving America. It is that the financial complex is reducing the share of its attention and capital that flows through American channels. That reduced volume means reduced fees, reduced intermediation revenue, reduced employment in American financial sector, and reduced tax revenue for American municipalities that depend on financial sector activity. The combined effect is a progressive hollowing out of the economic foundation that sustains American daily life. Not a dramatic collapse, not a single catastrophic event, a slow, grinding contraction of opportunity, services, and stability that has already been underway for years and will accelerate. The jobs that remain will increasingly be concentrated in two categories. At the top, a shrinking pool of high-value positions in technology, finance, and management that serve the global operations of the complexes. These jobs will pay well and will be concentrated in a handful of metropolitan areas. At the bottom, a vast and growing pool of service, logistics, enforcement, and gig economy positions that pay subsistent wages and offer no security, no benefits, and no path to advancement. The middle, the manufacturing jobs, the stable white-collar careers, the small business ownership that once defined American economic life, will cease to exist. The factories are in Asia. The growth markets are in the global south. The capital has moved on. Public services will continue to degrade. This is not a prediction. It is already happening. When the tax base contracts because capital and high-income earners optimize across jurisdictions, the revenue that funds schools, roads, water systems, and public safety declines. The response, visible in every post-industrial American city, is not to raise taxes on the capital that left, but to cut services for the population that stayed, and then to financialize the gap. Public water systems are privatized, public education is replaced by charter networks, public transportation is replaced by ride-sharing platforms, public safety is supplemented by private security. In each case, what was once public good funded by collective taxation becomes a private service funded individual payment, and the people who cannot pay simply go without. This is structural adjustment. It is the same program that the IMF imposed on the global South nations throughout the 80s and 90s, now arriving in the country that designed it. Healthcare will remain financialized. The American healthcare system does not exist to make people healthy. It exists to generate revenue for insurance companies, pharmaceutical manufacturers, hospital networks, and medical device firms. That revenue model does not require a healthy population. It requires a population that is sick enough to need treatment, insured enough to pay for it, or indebted enough to be billed for it, and politically powerless enough to be unable to change the system. As the complexes redirect outward and the domestic economy contracts, the population will become sicker. Stress, poverty, environmental degradation, reduced access to nutrition, while the healthcare system becomes more expensive. This is not a bug in the system. It is the system operating as designed. Housing will remain an asset class. The financialization of housing, the process by which homes were converted from places to live into investment vehicles for institutional capital, is irreversible within the current structure. BlackRock, Vanguard, and institutional investors now own significant portions of the American single-family housing stock. Their business model requires housing prices to rise, which requires housing to remain unaffordable for a growing share of the population, which requires a growing share of the population to rent rather than own, which generates perpetual cash flow for institutional owners. The population pays an increasing share of its declining income in rent, enriching the same institutional capital that is simultaneously redirecting its growth investment elsewhere. The citizens become a revenue source for capital that no longer invests in the citizen's country. The convergence of disillusionment described at the beginning of this post will intensify as the structural reality becomes more visible. The population will increasingly recognize that the electoral system offers no mechanism for changing the trajectory. The recognition produces one of three responses. The first is paralysis. A significant portion of the population will disengage entirely from political participation, concluding that the system cannot be changed from within and that resistance is futile. This outcome serves the capital class because a disengaged population does not organize, does not protest, and does not interfere with the extraction process. The second is misdirection. Another significant portion will be channeled into reactive political movements that direct anger at visible but structurally powerless targets: immigrants, racial minorities, cultural opponents, foreign governments. This misdirection is actively cultivated because it prevents the population from identifying the actual source of their declining conditions. Every dollar of political energy spent fighting the culture war is a dollar not spent examining the balance sheets of the institutions that own the country. The third is organization. A smaller but potentially consequential portion of the population will recognize that the only response to structural abandonment by the capital class is structural self-sufficiency. Community-based economic systems, mutual aid networks, cooperative housing, parallel education, local food production, and the gradual construction of institutions that serve the population rather than extracting from it. It's possible, but very hard. Understand that it's nothing personal. This is the path that colonized populations throughout the global south have walked for generations. It is now the path available to the American population, or more precisely, to the portions of the American population willing to build rather than to rage. The capital class is indifferent to which of these three responses predominates. Paralysis, misdirection, and organization all produce acceptable outcomes from their perspective, as long as none of them generate sufficient organized economic pressure to make injustice unprofitable. That's the only language they understand: profit and loss. Well, if you're American, I would probably listen to that again, absorb it, and share it with other Americans. Because what I've noticed about America is there's enough smart, brave, caring, helpful people that if you manage to understand what's coming, you don't have to worry about the petty shit. Understand this is the reality. Like he said, it's possible, but it's very hard. Anyway, that'll do it for tonight, and I'll see you the fuck later.